My wedding planner slept with my fiancé 3 days before our wedding and then sabotaged everything to steal him. She changed the flowers to funeral arrangements, hired strippers instead of musicians, and told my family the wrong date. He deserves someone more sophisticated. She smirked as I stood in my dress surrounded by chaos. What she didn't know was that I had recorded everything on the hidden cameras we installed to capture our perfect day. 2 hours later, I played the footage at our reception and destroyed both their lives forever. I used to believe that your wedding day was supposed to be the happiest day of your life. Now I know it can also be the day you discover exactly what kind of person you almost married and how far some people will go to get what they want. My name is Isabella Chen. I'm 26, and 3 months ago, I was supposed to marry the love of my life in what should have been a fairy tale wedding. Instead, I ended up exposing my fiancé and wedding planner's affair in front of 200 guests and destroying both their careers in the process. The crazy part is, if they hadn't been so greedy and cruel, I might never have found out what they were doing behind my back. 2 years ago, I met David Harrison at a marketing conference in Chicago. He was charming, successful, and everything I thought I wanted in a partner. He worked in corporate finance, drove a BMW, and had this confidence that I found irresistible. We moved in together after 8 months, and he proposed on our 1-year anniversary with a stunning 2-carat ring and a romantic dinner at the most expensive restaurant in the city. I was over the moon. David seemed like the perfect man, ambitious, good-looking, and completely devoted to me. At least, that's what I thought. When it came time to plan the wedding, David insisted we hire the best wedding planner in the city, even though it would cost us $25,000. Nothing but the best for my princess, he said. This is our day, and it needs to be perfect. That's how we ended up hiring Sophia Martinelli from Elite Wedding Events. She came highly recommended, had planned weddings for several celebrities, and had a portfolio that was absolutely stunning. Sophia was 32, gorgeous in that polished way that comes from expensive skincare and regular Botox, and she had this way of making you feel like your wedding was the most important event she'd ever planned. "Isabella, darling," she said during our first meeting, "I can see exactly what kind of bride you are. Elegant, sophisticated, someone who appreciates the finer things. We're going to create something absolutely magical." From the beginning, Sophia took charge of everything. She had opinions about every detail: the flowers, the venue, the music, the catering, even my dress. "Trust me, sweetie," she'd say whenever I questioned one of her suggestions. "I've been doing this for 12 years. I know what works and what doesn't." David was completely smitten with her from day one. "She really knows what she's doing," he'd tell me after our planning meetings. "We're lucky to have someone so experienced and professional." I noticed that he always had a lot of questions for Sophia about venues and vendors, often calling her directly instead of including me in the conversations. "It's just easier," he explained when I asked about it. "You're so busy with work, and I want to make sure we're getting the best options. Sophia understands exactly what we're looking for." The first red flag should have been when Sophia started suggesting changes to plans we'd already finalized. "I've been thinking about the flowers," she said during a meeting 6 weeks before the wedding. "The white roses and peonies are beautiful, but they're a bit predictable. What about something more dramatic? Maybe deep red roses with black accents?" "That sounds more like funeral flowers," I said, confused. "Oh no, darling, it's very avant-garde, very sophisticated. David mentioned that you both appreciate unique artistic choices." I looked at David, who nodded enthusiastically. "I think it sounds amazing. Very classy and memorable." Against my better judgment, I agreed to the change. The second red flag was when she suggested modifications to our guest list. "I've been reviewing the seating arrangements," she said, "and I think we should consider a more intimate celebration. Some of these guests, well, they might not fit the aesthetic we're going for." She was referring to my college friends and some of David's work colleagues, people she deemed not sophisticated enough for the upscale wedding she was planning. "These are our friends and family," I protested. "We want them there." "Of course, darling. But consider this. A smaller, more exclusive guest list creates a more elegant atmosphere. Quality over quantity." David agreed with her, naturally. She has a point, Izzy. Maybe we should focus on the people who really matter. We ended up cutting 40 people from our original list. The third red flag was when Sophia started scheduling private meetings with David. We need to discuss some vendor payments and final details, she'd tell me. David handles the finances, so it's easier to coordinate directly with him. These meetings always seem to run long. David would come home from them looking flustered and distracted. Everything okay? I'd ask. Just wedding stress, he'd say. Sophia is very thorough. She wants everything to be perfect. 2 weeks before the wedding, I started noticing changes in David's behavior. He was working late more often, taking phone calls in private, and seeming distant during conversations about the wedding. Are you having second thoughts? I asked him one night. What? No, of course not. I'm just stressed about work and making sure everything goes smoothly for the wedding. But something felt off. He'd become secretive about his phone, was less affectionate than usual, and seemed to be avoiding spending time alone with me. A week before the wedding, my maid of honor, Jessica, pulled me aside. Izzy, I need to tell you something, and you're not going to like it. What is it? I saw David and Sophia having lunch together yesterday. At Chez Laurent, that fancy French place downtown. They were sitting very close, holding hands across the table, and it looked intimate. My heart stopped. Are you sure it was them? Positive. I almost went over to say hi, but something about their body language made me hesitate. Then I saw David lean over and kiss her. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Maybe it was just a friendly kiss, like European style? Jessica gave me a look. Izzy, this wasn't a cheek kiss. This was a full-on romantic kiss. I'm so sorry. That night, I confronted David. Jessica saw you with Sophia yesterday. She said you were kissing. David's face went pale, then red. That's ridiculous. We had a business lunch to discuss final wedding details. Jessica must have misunderstood what she saw. She said you were holding hands and kissing. Isabella, you're being paranoid. Sophia is our wedding planner, not my girlfriend. I can't believe you'd even think something like that. He seemed so genuinely offended that I started to doubt what Jessica had seen. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. Maybe the stress of wedding planning was making me paranoid. You're right, I said. I'm sorry. I guess I'm just nervous about the wedding. It's okay, baby. Everything is going to be perfect. Trust me. But I didn't trust him. Something in my gut told me that Jessica was right and David was lying. That's when I made a decision that would change everything. Our venue, the Grand Ballroom at the Heritage Hotel, had offered to install hidden cameras throughout the reception space as part of their wedding memory package. The idea was to capture candid moments throughout the day that the professional photographer might miss. I'd originally thought it was a bit much, but now I saw an opportunity. I called the hotel and asked them to install additional cameras in the bridal suite, the groom's preparation room, and the coordination office that Sophia would be using on the wedding day. I want to capture every moment, I told them. This day is so important to us. The cameras were installed 2 days before the wedding, with feeds that went directly to a laptop. I kept hidden in my car. The morning of the wedding, I arrived at the hotel early to start getting ready. I was nervous, excited, and still harboring doubts about what Jessica had seen. As my hair and makeup artists worked on getting me ready, I kept checking the laptop to see the feeds from around the hotel. Everything seemed normal at first. David was in his preparation room with his groomsmen, looking handsome in his tuxedo. Sophia was in her coordination office making phone calls and checking her clipboard. Then, around 2 p.m., something changed. I watched on the laptop as Sophia left her office and walked to David's preparation room. His groomsmen had gone to get lunch, so he was alone. What I saw next destroyed everything I thought I knew about the man I was about to marry. Sophia walked into David's room and immediately went into his arms. They kissed passionately, like they'd been waiting all day to be alone together. I can't wait for this charade to be over, I heard Sophia say through the audio feed. Watching you pretend to be in love with that basic little girl is torture. Just a few more hours, David replied, stroking her hair. After tonight, we can stop pretending. Are you really going through with marrying her? I have to. Her father's company is about to go public, and I need access to that IPO investment opportunity. Once I'm family, I can get in on the ground floor. After a year or two, I'll divorce her and we can be together publicly. My blood ran cold. David was marrying me for my father's money, not because he loved me. What about the wedding? Are you ready for tonight? Everything's in place. The flowers you changed will make her look ridiculous in the photos. The band you hired will be entertaining. And you made sure her family got the wrong time, right? They think the ceremony starts at 6 p.m. instead of 4 p.m. They'll miss the whole thing. They laughed together, and I felt like I was going to be sick. Isabella is going to be humiliated, Sophia continued. Everyone will see what a mistake this wedding is, and you can blame it on her poor planning and lack of sophistication. Perfect. By the time we're done tonight, no one will question why our marriage doesn't work out. I sat there in my wedding dress, watching the two people I trusted most in the world plot to humiliate me on what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. But instead of falling apart, I felt something else. Pure, crystalline rage. They wanted to play games? Fine. I could play games too. The first thing I did was call my family and tell them that the ceremony time had been changed back to 4 p.m. They were confused but agreed to come earlier. The second thing I did was call the catering manager and make some changes to the reception menu. The third thing I did was contact the hotel's AV team about setting up a special surprise presentation for the reception. By 3:30 p.m., I was ready. The ceremony went off without a hitch, mostly because David and Sophia were both acting their parts perfectly. David looked appropriately emotional during our vows, and Sophia orchestrated everything with professional precision. My family arrived just in time, confused about the time change, but happy to be there. The flowers were indeed hideous, dark red roses arranged like funeral sprays. But I smiled and pretended everything was exactly what I'd wanted. The photos were going to be a disaster, but that was the least of my concerns now. The real show was going to be at the reception. During cocktail hour, I noticed that the band Sophia had hired was not the classical quartet we'd originally booked. Instead, it was a group of very attractive, very scantily clad women who looked more like strippers than musicians. "Darling," Sophia said when she saw my confused expression, "I made a last-minute change to add some excitement to your reception. Trust me, your guests will love it." David nodded enthusiastically. "It's going to be unforgettable." They were right about that. As our guests moved into the ballroom for dinner, I excused myself to touch up my makeup. Instead, I went to the AV control room and loaded the video footage I'd compiled from the hidden cameras. The hotel's events manager, Maria, had been helping me set up the surprise presentation all afternoon. "Are you sure you want to do this?" she asked, looking at the video clips I'd prepared. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. The presentation started during the salad course, when everyone was settled and paying attention. "Ladies and gentlemen," I announced, standing up with my champagne glass, "I have a very special surprise for you tonight. David and I wanted to share some behind-the-scenes moments from our wedding day." The lights dimmed, and the large screens around the ballroom lit up with footage of David getting ready, looking handsome and nervous. The guests smiled and made appreciative noises. This seemed like a sweet, romantic gesture. Then the footage switched to David and Sophia's conversation in his preparation room. The ballroom fell silent as everyone watched David and Sophia kissing passionately on screen. "I can't wait for this charade to be over," Sophia's voice echoed through the sound system. "Watching you pretend to be in love with that basic little girl is torture." Gasps filled the room. People started looking around, confused and horrified. The footage continued, showing their entire conversation about the marriage being a financial scheme, the deliberate sabotage of the wedding, and their plans to humiliate me. "Her father's company is about to go public, and I need access to that IPO investment opportunity. After a year or two, I'll divorce her and we can be together publicly." David had gone white as a sheet. Sophia looked like she was about to faint. Some guests started getting up from their tables. Others were taking out their phones to record what was happening. "Turn it off," David shouted, jumping up from the head table. But the presentation wasn't over. The final clip showed Sophia and David laughing about my humiliation, discussing how the wedding disasters would make me look stupid and unsophisticated. When the screens finally went dark, The ballroom was completely silent. I stood up, still holding my champagne glass, and looked directly at David and Sophia. "Surprise," I said calmly. "I guess you were right about one thing. This wedding is definitely going to be unforgettable." The chaos that followed was spectacular. David tried to defend himself, claiming the footage was taken out of context, but it was pretty hard to explain away. "I need access to that IPO investment opportunity." Sophia tried to run, but she tripped over her stilettos and fell face first into the wedding cake. My father, who had been quiet during the presentation, stood up and walked over to David. "Son," he said in his calm, terrifying CEO voice, "you might want to start looking for a new job and a new place to live." Several of David's groomsmen were staring at him in disgust. His best man, Tom, actually apologized to me for not knowing what David was planning. "We had no idea," Tom said. "This is sick. I'm so sorry, Isabella." But the best part was watching Sophia try to salvage her reputation. "This is all a misunderstanding," she said, cake frosting still in her hair. "Isabella is clearly having some kind of breakdown. The stress of wedding planning can make brides very unstable." That's when I played my final card. "You're right, Sophia. Planning a wedding is stressful, especially when your wedding planner is sabotaging everything to steal your fiancé. Speaking of which," I pulled out my phone and showed the ballroom security footage from earlier that afternoon, which clearly showed Sophia changing our floral arrangements from the beautiful white roses I'd originally ordered to the funeral sprays that were currently decorating the ballroom. "You deliberately sabotaged my wedding to make me look bad," I continued. "You hired strippers instead of the classical quartet I booked. You told my family the wrong time so they'd miss the ceremony. And you did it all so you could steal a man who was only marrying me for my father's money." The room erupted in angry voices. Several guests were shouting at David and Sophia. My cousin Marcus, who's a lawyer, was taking notes on his phone. But I wasn't done yet. "Oh, and Sophia, you might want to check your phone. I sent copies of this footage to the Wedding Planning Association, your professional licensing board, and every vendor you work with. I also posted it on your business's social media accounts with a detailed explanation of what you did." Sophia's face went from pale to green. Her business reputation was everything in the wedding industry. No one would ever hire her again after seeing proof that she sabotages weddings for personal gain. David made one last desperate attempt to save himself. "Isabella, please, let me explain. I love you. This was all Sophia's idea. She seduced me and convinced me to go along with her plan." I looked at him with all the contempt I could muster. "David, I recorded everything. I have footage of you discussing your financial motivations for marrying me. You called me a basic little girl and laughed about humiliating me. There's no explaining that away." Security had to escort both David and Sophia out of the hotel as angry guests shouted at them. The last thing I heard Sophia say was, "This isn't over, you crazy bitch." But it was over. For both of them. Within 24 hours, the footage had gone viral on social media. The story was picked up by local news stations and wedding industry publications. Sophia's business, Elite Wedding Events, lost all of its upcoming bookings. Several vendors publicly cut ties with her company. The Wedding Planning Association suspended her membership and launched an ethics investigation. David lost his job when his boss saw the footage and realized that David had been planning to use insider information from my father's company for personal gain. He also lost our apartment, since it was in my name, and I'd been paying most of the rent. The engagement ring had to be returned to the jewelry store, since David had bought it with a credit card and couldn't make the payments without his job. But the consequences went beyond their professional lives. David's family was mortified. His mother called to apologize and told me that they disowned him for his behavior. Sophia's husband, yes, she was married, which I found out later, filed for divorce immediately after seeing the footage. My father, who had been considering David for a position at his company, made sure that David was blacklisted from every financial firm in the city. The wedding industry is surprisingly small, and word travels fast. Sophia became a cautionary tale that was discussed at industry conferences and in trade publications. As for me, I kept the reception going after they left. Well, I announced to our remaining guests, this wasn't exactly the wedding I planned, but it turned out to be pretty entertaining. Should we at least enjoy the food? The stripper band, it turned out, could actually play music reasonably well when they kept their clothes on. The food was excellent, and the open bar helped everyone process what they just witnessed. My family and friends rallied around me, telling me how proud they were that I'd handled the situation with such strength and grace. I can't believe you kept it together long enough to plan that presentation, Jessica said. I would have confronted them the moment I saw the footage. I wanted them to hang themselves completely, I replied. If I'd confronted them privately, they would have just denied everything and probably found a way to turn it around on me. The story had a few more twists in the weeks that followed. It turned out that David and Sophia had been planning this scheme for months. They'd met at a wedding industry networking event and had started targeting engaged couples where one partner came from a wealthy family. I wasn't their first victim. They'd pulled similar cons on at least 3 other couples, though none of those had gone as far as an actual wedding. When the other victims saw the news coverage of my wedding, they came forward with their own stories. David and Sophia were facing criminal fraud charges, in addition to all the civil lawsuits. The investigation revealed that Sophia had been embezzling money from her clients for years, overcharging for services and pocketing the difference. David had been using information from his finance job to make illegal insider trades. They were both looking at potential prison time. 6 months later, I received a letter from Sophia in jail. She claimed that she was sorry for what she'd done and that she'd been going through a difficult time in her marriage. She said that David had manipulated her into going along with his scheme. She asked me to write a letter to the judge requesting leniency for her sentencing. I wrote back with just 4 words. You made your choice. David never tried to contact me, which was probably smart. My father had made it very clear that any attempt to reach out to me would result in additional legal action. A year later, I'm doing great. I moved to a new city and started my own marketing consulting business. Turns out, surviving a public betrayal and handling it with grace made me somewhat famous in business circles. I've been featured in several magazines as an example of grace under pressure and turning crisis into opportunity. I'm dating someone new, a teacher named Michael, who doesn't care about my family's money and thinks the wedding story is hilarious. You're like a superhero, he told me. You defeated the villains with hidden cameras and PowerPoint. I've also become an advocate for better regulation in the wedding industry. I've spoken at conferences about the importance of background checks for wedding vendors and the need for stronger consumer protections. The best part is that I helped other brides avoid similar situations. After my story went viral, several wedding planning scams were exposed and shut down. David and Sophia were both sentenced to 3 years in prison. David's financial fraud charges carried heavier penalties than Sophia's embezzlement, but they both lost everything. David's LinkedIn profile, last I checked, said he was working as a car salesman in a different state. Sophia lost her house, her business, and her marriage. She's reportedly working at a call center and living with her parents. People often ask me if I regret how I handled the situation. Some think I should have just called off the wedding quietly and handled things privately. But I don't regret it at all. David and Sophia plan to humiliate me publicly and destroy my faith in love and marriage for their own financial gain. They got exactly what they deserved: public humiliation and destroyed reputations. The only thing I regret is not seeing the red flags sooner. But I learned an important lesson. Trust your instincts, and when someone shows you who they really are, believe them. Oh, and always read the fine print on vendor contracts. You'd be amazed what wedding planners can get away with if you're not paying attention. My advice to anyone planning a wedding: do your research, trust your gut, and maybe consider some hidden cameras. You never know what you might discover. As for David and Sophia, I hope they learned their lesson about trying to con the wrong person. Some people are easier targets than others. They pick the wrong bride,